1969 True Grit movie starring John Wayne was the first grown-up movie I saw as a kid. So I'd seen, kiddie films, but I was 9 years old and my parents took me there, and so it was a really unforgettable experience. I also realized for the first time I had a gift for mimicry, because for years afterwards I was made to stand up at family parties and imitate John Wayne from True Grit. So it's a movie that stayed in my imagination for a long time. And I heard just, in recent months that the Coen brothers, who are my favorite filmmakers on the scene today, were doing a remake of True Grit. And I think the Coen brothers are the most spiritually alert filmmakers today. So I love Fargo and A Serious Man and No Country for Old Men and those films. So the combination of True Grit and the Coen brothers got me pretty worked up. And I wasn't disappointed. This movie stays true to the basic plot of True Grit, but it's by no means a remake simply of a John Wayne movie. It brings out, in fact, a lot of the spiritual power in the book. The movie opens with a voiceover from the main character, Maddie. And she's an older woman at this point with a voiceover, and she says, "The only thing in life that's free is the grace of God." So right away, you're sensing there's something of spiritual moment going to happen in this movie. And I think the movie unfolds as a meditation upon grace and law, or what's given as a gift and what's strictly owed. The basic story, is that Maddie's father has been killed by a man named Tom Chaney, whom the father had befriended. So it was a terrible act of betrayal and violence. He killed the father. Maddie, now with single-minded devotion, sets out to avenge her father's death. And what we see in this young girl, she's extraordinary. She's 14 years old, but she is smart as all get out. She's courageous, she is focused, and above all, she's an embodiment of justice. She's the embodiment of contract, obligation, what's owed. She's going to make sure that everyone who is owed is paid. Everyone that has to pay ends up paying. I mean, she is very careful about that. She hires Rooster Cogburn, who's this old wizened, lawman who has true grit, and he's the one that will track down her father's killer. Jeff Bridges, of course, plays Rooster Cogburn with his customary naturalness. He's not a lot like John Wayne's version, but the character is wonderful. He sets out to get the killer, and he leaves Maddie behind, convinced that this, 14-year-old city slicker girl is just going to slow him down. And then to his great surprise, he sees her riding a horse right across the river, and she gets up to him, and she says, "You are in breach of contract." And so we know we're dealing with a mulier fortis, as the Romans would have said. This is a strong woman, not one to be trifled with. So now Maddie, with her single-minded quest for justice, and her lawman, Rooster Cogburn, head into Indian country after Tom Chaney. Rooster's convinced that Chaney might have fallen in with Ned Pepper's gang, and this is a gang of kind of desperados living out in this lawless country. So they track a few of them down, and they corner them, and there's a very intense and violent interrogation, at the end of which 2 are dead and 1 is wounded. Next day, Maddie finds Chaney down by the river, and she manages to shoot him. Doesn't kill him yet, but she's captured by Ned Pepper's gang. Then, of course, in that maybe the most famous scene in both movies, Rooster, all by himself, puts the reins in his mouth and fills both hands, and he goes after Ned Pepper's gang, ends up killing all 4 of them. Maddie manages to wriggle free from her captivity, and she gets this great gun out, and she shoots Tom Chaney. She's fulfilled her mission. But in the very act of shooting him with this big gun, boom, she's kicked back into a snake pit. Now, I'll get back to the snake pit in a second. But look, first of all, here's this 14-year-old girl, right? What her single-minded quest for justice has produced. By this point in the movie, it's produced 8 corpses. And so she's after 1 guy. But by God, 8 people have died because of this girl's absolutely single-minded passion. Now notice, in the very act of fulfilling her deepest desire to get vengeance on Tom Chaney, in the very act of it, she's kicked back into a snake pit. Now, nobody with a biblical sensibility is going to miss that little symbolic overtone. See, here's what's happening, I think. The one-sided focus on justice has led to a very deep dysfunction, a very deep disproportion. In fact, has led her into sin. At the pit, at the base of the pit there, she's actually bitten by a poisonous snake. And so there she is, snake bit, in the pit. She's fallen. It's her very drive for justice alone that has compromised her. At this point, she looks up and she sees Rooster, the old lawman, lowering himself by a rope to come down. He comes down to the bottom of the pit. He cuts into her hand, then he draws the poison out, and then brings her back up out of the pit. And then he puts her on a horse, and they ride furiously through the night to get to a doctor who's many miles away. They ride so furiously that the horse just gives out. The horse collapses. So then Rooster, older man, picks her up in his two arms and carries her till in utter exhaustion he arrives at the doctor's porch to deliver her and save her life. Now, Cogburn is a man of the law, and like Maddie, he was aiming to bring a killer to justice. But what these heroic actions on behalf of the girl reveal is that he's more than that. His passion for justice is accompanied by, even surpassed by, his mercy, his graciousness, his willingness to give even when that giving was not, strictly speaking, owed. Now then, it's very interesting the way the movie ends, because this ending is not in the original John Wayne one at all. We flash forward from that scene of Maddie being delivered to the doctor. We flash forward many years, where she's now a middle-aged woman. And she's very prim. She's very cold. She makes a dismissive comment about marriage. Like, oh, marriage, I could never be bothered with that. She makes a very cutting remark to a man, totally uncalled for. So she's a very kind of difficult, cold woman. And then the camera pulls back and we notice she has one arm. So Rooster had saved her life, but the doctor obviously couldn't have saved her arm. So the arm was cut off, and there she is with one arm. And she hears about the death of Rooster Cogburn. That's really how the movie ends, and she gets word of it. But then, here's the giveaway, and the Coens are so good at this. The last song on the soundtrack, as the movie ends, is that great old hymn, The Everlasting Arms, that includes that line about finding the joy divine as we lean on the everlasting arms of God. And that brought it together for me. The movie sort of climaxes with Rooster carrying her in his two arms. He was a man of justice too. He's a lawman, right? He's a sheriff. But he was more than justice. He was also a man of mercy and compassion, embodying thereby the God who is indeed a God of justice, but also even more, I might say, the God of mercy. And those are the everlasting arms in which God holds the universe, both justice and mercy. And then you think, yes, Maddie ends up with only one arm, because that's her problem all through the movie. She's a woman of justice, 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 and that's it. And the one arm, that with which she shot Cheney, kicks her back into the snake pit. So I think the Coens, who gave us great images of God in that pregnant police officer in Fargo, in the great whirlwind at the end of The Serious Man, have also given us a great image of the God whose mercy and justice in the strong arms of Rooster Cogburn.